We made it happen. Jimmy was an incredible success. I don't know where he is. I got to find him. Gosh, I don't. Oh.
Oh, yeah, George. Oh, George.
Right
George.
here. Yeah.
We did it, brother.
Yes, we
hey,
did.
Thanks to Dan. You know what? And in the ring with Dan and Benny. Hey, brother, man, hey, he's about the most cat. I just love him to death. I love you. Thanks for having me. Hey, you're the best. I'm telling you, brother. In the ring with
Dan and Benny.
Yeah.
We love you. Thank you so much.
Dan.
Mwah.
Oh, yeah.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another edition of Dan and Benny in the Ring. I'm Dan Spasciano, joined as always by the playa himself, Benny Scala. Benny, episode 160. We both survived winter storms. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, and a great weekend of football. In the past few days, both the Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles were eliminated. So at the moment, life is really good.
Yeah, I usually wear wrestling shirts for the show. Kind of been my thing. I had to sport this today just in celebration to let Philly and Dallas know that the NFC East, we all suck. So,
and my Bucks are still alive, albeit probably not for long.
Hey, you know what? You guys, you exposed Philly. They were saying they went from last year they were in the Super Bowl, and this year the coach is getting food thrown at him as he's walking down the tunnel. So Eagles fans are a what's the word? Monsters.
The Bucks are still in it. They're like James Ellsworth. Every man with two hands has a fighting chance to send dick pics to underage girls.
Jesus. Baker Mayfield is everyone's hero today. But we got a fun topic today, Benny. This is going to be kind of a shorter episode than usual because we're just going to kind of chat. We wanted to talk about social media and wrestling, but as our viewers at home can see, we've got our pretty well-known face around these parts joining us today. Benny, why don't you tell everybody who the third man on the circle is tonight?
Yeah, I don't know if we can actually call our guest a guest. He's actually a fellow member of the Monty family, co-contestant with us on the 30 and the Wednesday night host of Whattaday in Centerville. He is the one and only Joe Whattaday Lowry. Joe, welcome to Dan and Benny in the Ring.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Finally got to I'm making the big time now.
Finally.
This is it. Dan and Benny in the Ring. I've heard all about it. I'm so excited. Let's roll. Let's get this
all
going.
the it's funny to think about all the interactions we've had, the 30, the show, the Monty and the Pharaoh stuff, and this is actually the first time we've done a Dan and Benny episode with just the three of us, so it should be fun.
Yeah, three amigos.
Yep. Right. Well, like I said at the top of the hour, it's going to be a little different today. It's a shorter episode, but we wanted to talk about social media and the impact, social media in wrestling, the impact it's been having. Obviously, social media has been in the news a lot recently. Tony Khan had a very high-profile Twitter meltdown, as did Chris Jericho on Christmas and his Twitter feud with Stephen P. New. And then recently, the Twitter unfolded the stories of the NDA and Twitter's, Jericho's battle on Twitter. And I'll keep saying Twitter. I just can't bring myself to call it X.
I can't either.
With fans and reporters over NDAs. So we're going to start with the obvious, the big one, because it's the one that's fresh in everyone's mind. Guys, Joe, I'll start with you. This Monday night, we're recording on a Tuesday. This last Monday that just passed, Seth Rollins defended the World Heavyweight title against Jinder Mahal. And Tony Khan had a absolute meltdown recently where he was ranting on social media that he was offended that Jinder Mahal, he called him out on it. You haven't won a match in a year. You're basically a jobber. You're a bum, and you're getting a title shot while I want to promote Hook. I'm pushing Hook as a potential heavyweight champion, and everyone's questioning why this skinny nobody who's only had like 20 matches or 25 matches or whatever. So, Joe, I'll start with you. What brings a man who owns a wrestling company, Booker of the Year, that he loves to talk about, to look at a tall, muscular former WWE champion who can cut a promo and wonder why that guy is taken more seriously as a heavyweight contender than a skinny mid-carder with a made-up belt who's only wrestled 25 times in 3 years?
You know, I don't know what's going on with Tony Khan, but I swear to God, he's jumping off the deep end lately. My biggest thing to take away with this is I was reading an article today, And the whole Hook thing was a direct response to the Jinder Mahal thing. Now, we got the meltdown from Tony Khan last week with this whole thing and all that. And of course, Jinder Mahal responding. You know, at what point do you stop selling your product and become a mark? Because I think that's what's happening now. I think MJF got it right last May when he called Tony Khan an effing mark. And I think that's what Tony's turning out to be. I mean, you know, he's got his pockets lined with daddy's money and so forth. I feel bad for Jacksonville. I mean, they didn't even make the playoffs. We were talking about football earlier, right? So, I mean, they're losing some money there. You would think you'd want to at least capitalize on this. I don't know what's going on with Tony Khan. Something has flipped in the last 6 months. I really think ever since the CM Punk incident with Jack Perry, we can talk about the Jack Perry sighting over the weekend as well. I think ever since that whole thing has been blown out of the water, it's gained like this crazy traction. And I think right now what's happening is, I don't know if they're using social media to their advantage or they're not, but to go on as a wrestling, not a promoter, as a wrestling owner, to have a public meltdown over the fact that Jinder Mahal is having a world title match on Raw as a former champion who obviously would, you know, is entitled to that, but then to recap it with Hook and that ridiculous Samoa Joe, I think that's going to happen tomorrow night, right? The
correct. Yep.
Tuesday. So, I mean, that was a deliberate shot in the face. And then, of course, Kevin Nash on his podcast today was like, who the F is Hook? Give him the F and Hook, you know? So right now I feel that social media they're teetering on that fine line. I think it all started with COVID. I know we had this talk backstage earlier, but I think when everybody was starting to be held captive and they started seeing that there were certain couples that were intertwined within AEW, WWE, TNA, Impact, all that stuff. Right. I think in the long run, as these things go full circle, it might end up hurting the wrestling world as a whole, because kayfabe's gone. It's not there anymore. We don't see it, or they try and have it, and it's not working out because someone's blowing it out of the water. So it's not like the days I saw the Freebirds walking through the airport playing the whole shtick going onto a plane. Now it's, you know, you can see them at the airport being human beings, and, you know, that's just not the way it is. I think social media is going to end up hurting this sport in the long run. What
do you think, Benny?
Well, as you can see in my background, Tony Khan did do something right, though. He did sign Aunt Esther to a long-term contract. So the only question right now is who's going to manage her. I don't know if Grady from Sanford and Son is still available or not, but I just want to use my age to point out the differences. So in 1969, I remember this because I wrote a letter to Vince McMahon, not Jr., but Senior. And the reason why I wrote the letter was, I said, why do you always have these matches on TV where it's, it's lopsided? Why do you have George Animal Steel against, Lenny Solomon or Lee Wong from Hong Kong or, Miguel Feliciano? Why can't you have more even matches? And of course, being so young, I didn't understand the business model. The whole business model was to get the heels, you do the squash matches to build up the heels so that they can sell at the Garden with Bruno. But, and of course I never got an answer, but how often did you hear the name Vince McMahon back in the day? Or how often did you hear the name Jim Crockett? The product was the wrestling. And it just seems now with social media, the only time that it ever worked where the owner was a storyline was Mr. McMahon, which did. I mean, that was money. But right. I mean, I think that was just that was lightning in a bottle. And I don't think that's something that should be like a steady recipe. I think that was a one-timer. And I just think Tony Khan, with his antics, is taking away from the product.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, let me ask you, actually, Benny, that's a great point when you talked about Mr. McMahon, because the idea, that stemmed from a real life issue with the Montreal Screwjob and Vince McMahon, kind of the Brett Screwed Brett interview, and he molded himself into that. Is there any way for Tony to salvage this, or is this long-term planning? Is there any chance whatsoever that this is Tony Khan playing the some kind of character that'll show up and help AEW on TV somewhere? Or is this, like Joe said, is this just an angry, probably, and I'm, just based on what I've seen with my own eyes, maybe a substance and enhanced mark that, it was just needs to stay off Twitter.
Like Jim Cornette says, Tony Khan is the modern day Richie Rich. He's an incompetent buffoon who plays with daddy's money. And I think and he's not playing an incompetent buffoon. He is an incompetent buffoon. I think the best thing that he can do is get a wrestling person to run his wrestling company and just, stay in the background.
Yeah, I agree. Yep, definitely.
Well, okay, transitioning away, because we talked about Tony Khan now. Obviously, there's a lot of incidences recently that came out on social media with, excuse me, with QT Marshall. And if you guys remember the story when they announced that Kevin Sullivan had left the company, and they had to explain that it was not the Kevin Sullivan everyone was thinking of, it was a different person.
I remember that.
The wife of Matt Jackson, who ran their merchandise, left, and then Dave Meltzer revealed on social media that she was mad that the company she didn't feel the company had their back in their fight with CM Punk. All this stuff comes out. It's anytime something happens. I mean, Benny, you guys are both older than me. Wrestling is filled from start to finish in history with locker room fisticuffs, locker room justice. What are they? Wrestlers court, whatever they want to call it. Two guys throwing down. They wipe the blood off. We figure out who's right, who's wrong. Everybody goes and goes out there and does business. But no one cared or talked about it the way they do now. This whole thing, go back to the they call it the brawl out, which I think is hilarious. CM Punk gets into a physical altercation in the locker room with the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, and there's, obviously other producers involved, people breaking up the fight. Ace Steel, at some point, Kenny Omega gets bit. One of the Young Bucks gets hit in the face with a chair. The Ace Steel and CM Punk are the clear winners of this physical altercation.
But not one video
Right.
has surfaced.
And now it's been revealed through social media that everybody involved has signed lifetime NDAs. And all of a sudden, and this goes back to our social media talking, Chris Jericho decides at 4 a.m. on, I believe, Christmas Day, or 2 a.m, whenever it was, that he's going to start ranting about, well, I was there, which he wasn't. There's video evidence showing that he was elsewhere in the building at the time. I was there. I never signed an NDA. And he gets into a huge Twitter war with Stephen P. New, the consigliere of the cult of Cornette, as they call him, famous attorney, because Stephen P. New represented CM Punk and Ace Steel in their NDA battle with the legal proceedings that followed this. So, Joe, I'll go to you first. What do you do as a company, as a promoter? So here's Tony Khan. He has to be the bigger man and come to Chris Jericho and say, you can't be 4 a.m. saying all this crazy shit on Twitter when he's doing it. What do you do when you've got people in the locker room that it's a free-for-all, Wild West rules whenever they want to get on social media?
Well, whether this is planned or not, I mean, what stays in the locker room stays in the locker room. What happens in the locker room stays in the locker room. I don't understand why this stuff is leaking out. You talk about the past when, wrestlers got in altercations backstage. I've seen it, all that stuff. But it never made the papers. It never made the internet and all that stuff, because what happened backstage stays backstage. Why Tony Khan is allowing this to happen is twofold. Either he's allowing it to happen to use this as a sick way of promoting his company, because in turn, what's going to happen is the company looks like it's in total disarray. For Chris Jericho to come out in the middle of the night on Christmas night to say, hey, look, I didn't sign an NDA, and get an argument with a lawyer representing CM Punk about an altercation that happened months prior, there's something wrong backstage. And I think Seth Rollins hit it on the head, because he was asked for it in the WWE. And Seth Rollins says, if something like that happened in the WWE, it would not happen in the WWE, because they have protocols set up in place that it would not happen. Things like that would not happen. There is a chain of command. There are things that you do. There are people that you see. Whether or not AEW is slowly turning that corner into WCW remains to be seen, but they are definitely going down a slippery slope right now with all this backstage drama. And like I said, whether or not he's, for all we know, Tony Khan could be the smartest man in the room, because he is doing this on purpose. Because why? Here we are on a Tuesday night recording this podcast talking about Tony Khan and AEW. And that's basically what it is. Any press is better than no press, whether it's bad press, good press, or whatever press. I feel that AEW is teetering on that slope of WCW right now. They need to rattle in the reins with everybody whether or not that they have to restructure everybody's contracts, where what happens inside the locker room does not leave the locker room. And that includes leaking matches and leaking dirty laundry and all that stuff. So I think right now they are teetering on a very slippery slope, and AEW is slowly going to be turned into WCW if they keep this up with the social media.
Benny, I want you to kind of expand on that, because that's a great point. If Twitter existed the way it did or does now in 99, 2000, do you see Kevin Nash and the WCW people in the background getting in 4 a.m. fights? Or is this maybe worse than even that was?
I think it's worse because, as bad as WCW was, I mean, you had somebody in charge. I think, the whole business model is flawed. You have a Tony Khan who really doesn't want to be an owner. He wants to be a buddy. And he appoints wrestlers and he puts them in EVP positions. How are they qualified to be executive vice presidents? I mean, you need real administrators in those positions. And what happened with Punk and Jack Perry? That never would have happened in WWE. What would have happened is, if Jack Perry had the balls to go into business for himself, The Undertaker would have been waiting at the gorilla position. He would have blasted him. He would have knocked him into next week. And that would have been all there was to it. You never would have heard another word about it. Maybe he would have got fired. Who knows? But, you wouldn't have Vince McMahon saying, I feared for my life. I mean, no, none of that. It's just a poorly run company. And the one thing we haven't talked about yet, and I'm not really that well versed on it, is their upcoming TV deal. I know that they're projected to lose $34 million this year. That's pretty significant. I don't see it getting any better for them.
Yeah, I can't imagine, because while little has come out from it, the incident in London when CM Punk and Jack Perry had their physical altercation. If Jack Perry had gone into business, CM Punk was the biggest star in the company. If Jack Perry had gone into business for himself and called out Stone Cold Steve Austin or The Rock, Vince McMahon would have fired him as he was coming through the curtain. This like the story with the Ultimate Warrior or Jeff Jarrett.
There's zero tolerance for that in the WWE.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because this is the repercussions of it. This is what happens. We're talking in AEW in a negative light, whether it's good press or bad press. We're still talking in a negative light, and this is something that should A, never have happened, and B, we should not be talking about it.
You're talking about a well-managed corporation versus a fraternity house.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of which, Benny, because social media obviously is big with, like you just said, and like Joe said, we're talking about it. Do you think the fact that there are people like, Dave Meltzer's out of the world who have, he has mentioned in his comments that he texts Tony Khan that he's got the Young Bucks on speed dial. Will you have people, and I'm not trying to single him out, he's just the most egregious example, but when you have people who make their living spreading backstage information, isn't that a recipe for failure when they have such direct access to your entire locker room?
Yeah, rumor has it that Tony Khan stopped short one day and then Dave Meltzer fractured his nose in 3 places. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but it's just not good. I mean, there's nothing good coming from this organization. There's nothing. I mean, and I've been very, very outspoken about Vince McMahon for the entire 3 years we've done this podcast, but I got to give the devil his due. I mean, the man is in charge, and what he says goes. And everybody is under the same marching orders. You don't have this. You'd never have this type of chaos in WWE.
No, never. And speaking with Dave Meltzer and all them, at what point do they become part of the problem as opposed to rather the solution? I understand Meltzer's been around for years. I remember him trying to be a wrestler back in the day. He couldn't make it as a wrestler, so he turned onto the other side, created the Wrestling Observer and all that stuff. And back then it was mailed to you, so you got the news a month later and so forth. Now it's online and it's at the ready and so forth. So these guys are making money off these situations. But then there's the other side of me where, like, are they being fed this? Are they being fed to the wolves, so to speak? Are they saying, okay, here's a little tidbit of what happened the other day backstage, you run with it? And that's where things get really, really dangerous, complicated, and it's going to cost people money in the long run because, like you said, Benny, what, $34 million they stand to lose with their television deal?
I mean, I know the guy's a billionaire, but that's still a lot of money.
It doesn't matter. You're a business owner. The business is to make money, not lose money. And now they're losing money.
At what point does Daddy pull the plug? Like, that's enough, Junior.
Well, if Trevor Lawrence doesn't help him out sooner or later, I mean, I don't know what's going to
Yeah.
happen, because that was their bread and butter, right? They were supposed to make the playoffs and go somewhere this year, but
That
last
was
game of the season.
actually, I don't know if either of you saw the tweet. The Jacksonville Jaguars had posted about, Tony Khan had posted about, get your, or he retweeted, I should say, get your playoff tickets on sale now, and then they don't make the playoffs. And the WWE on Fox Twitter page posted that image of the surprised Kurt Angle meme, like, "Ooh, what'd you guys do now?"
Yeah.
But which is funny when you see that with the Tony Khan meltdown. We talked about his thing with Hook and Jinder, where actual companies are chiming in and openly laughing at him, and it's, I don't know, it's something else. But I want to touch on you said something before we started recording, and I want to get to that, because what Benny said got me thinking. Obviously, you said they have to be part of the solution. Well, in recent, just the last few months, we've seen some very big stories break that were, the papers were way off base. I mean, I remember Dave Meltzer swearing up and down, CM Punk is done with AEW. CM Punk is going to have nothing to do with Collision. And then when he ends up leaving the company, CM Punk had 2 contracts because he was actually contracted as the executive producer and show lead for Collision. So you're wrong across the board. And then there's the same thing. All the papers, like you were saying, CM Punk is not going to the WWE, 0% chance. And they not only did they feed them false information, because Punk had been in the building, he's there signing the contract, and they're still saying, haven't seen him, haven't heard from him. But then they frame it perfectly, and I think it's one of the biggest pops I've heard in ages.
Definitely.
The camera zooms out. There's the little graphic in the corner, the see you on Monday for Raw, and then the music hits. I mean, it was that was a deliberate middle finger to everybody who got it wrong.
Michael Cole strategically stopped talking. Yep.
That's what I was going to ask you, Joe. Social media, the WWE seems to be using it as a weapon, or actually maybe more a marketing tool. What are your thoughts on that?
I definitely agree. We were talking about this before the show. Like you said, I believe that WWE now has learned the value of social media and how they can use it to their advantage. So another case in point is this constant trolling with Mercedes Moné not going to the WWE, going to AEW. I'm fully expecting her now to show up at the Royal Rumble, because this is how I think the WWE is going to start marketing and promoting. Don't forget, they're cross-promoting now. They're no longer, they're under TKO Endeavor Holdings now with UFC that make a ton of money off social media. And so does the WWE. But there's money to be made there. If they want to continue that element of surprise, they're going to continue to feed the dirt sheets, and whoever is going to report it, whether it's a guy like me asking them for a comment, they're going to tell me one thing, but they're going to do another. And we're all going to be hung out to dry over that. And there's going to be no integrity left in the industry, journalistic integrity-wise, because if the WWE keeps doing that, when does that backfire? Oh, you say they're not coming? So they are coming. Oh, they're not coming? Well, they are coming. You can go back and forth and do that. So I fully expected, in a sense, I was watching Survivor Series that night. They were chanting CM Punk's name. You just knew something was going to happen. But yeah, they waited to the least spot. If the graphic goes up, Cole stops talking. I want to say, because I rewound it a few times, they started to go black on top a little bit, like they were going to fade out. And then CM Punk's music hit, and the rest is history. 70+ million views on social media and so forth.
Right.
So they're going to use that to their advantage now. How they use it's going to be very, very innovative from here on out, because it's no longer going to be, you're not going to hear about the bad stuff, the fights backstage, the botched moves and all that stuff. We'll always get that stuff. Another case in point that reminds me of, how about social media was very quick. Was it a few weeks ago, NXT, Ilya Dragunov got hurt. They got stretchered out, ambulance. I was on X, Twitter, all that stuff. Everybody was talking about wrestling news. They were talking, oh my God, he's hurt. I can't believe it. And they played that to a T, but everybody in the building knew they were all set to tape NXT the following week because it was the holiday week schedule. So they were taping an hour later.
Right.
And here comes Ilya Dragunov again. He's fine. So for a moment, they tried it. It didn't work out very well, because 2 days later, everyone figured, okay, well, if you tape that, so we must be okay. But they still went as far as saying, they put it out there. There's medics around it. They stopped the match. They stopped whatever they had to stop. You got hurt and all that.
Yeah.
So you believed it for a moment, suspended in time. So, how the WWE uses this from here on out is going to be very, very innovative. Very innovative.
It's funny, and Benny, you're the money man, so I want to get your thoughts on this one. I don't know if you guys remember, what was it, 20 years ago, maybe the big build up at WrestleMania was they called it the Battle of the Billionaires. Vince McMahon against pre-president Donald Trump. They each picked
Bobby Lashley represented.
Lashley and Umaga. Well,
who had no hair.
The storyline going into it was Donald Trump had bought Monday Night Raw and then had to sell it back to Vince McMahon for twice the money or whatever. But apparently, to fuel the fire, they actually did the legal filings. And I mean, it was never official, but there was enough of a bank trail that WWE stock actually went down because investors were worried that Trump and Trump Holdings may be starting to invest in WWE. So where do you, like Joe was asking Benny, where do you draw the line where you got to worry about money? Like if I'm going to bring in CM Punk as a surprise, obviously you got to start making merchandise ahead of time. You got to worry about ticket sales. Where does social media draw the line on pushing the envelope too far before you actually start to lose or gain real money?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I was just going to say that I don't think so. You got WWE, billion-dollar company. They can mint money literally. They're a well-run company. You got AEW, who's in complete disarray, who's losing $34 million a year. And I believe the stat is they have 188 wrestlers on contract. And I think their payroll is like $85 million, which they're way, way, way overloaded with wrestlers.
That's WCW stuff right there.
Does WWE even? I mean, I think they're just toying with AEW. Do they? I don't think they really take them seriously.
No. I think you saw that with the if you remember when AEW was first launching and they signed like the Good Brothers and all these huge contracts, and then about a year into AEW's existence, it was like, oh, this is the best they're ever going to be, and then they started releasing everybody in mass. So no, I don't think they take them seriously. I think the fact that CM Punk and Joe, what's your thought on this one? When he's cutting one of his big return promos, he mentions Kevin Owens. And he's like, oh, I don't want to mess with that guy. He punches people in the locker room. You can't work with someone like that. And the crowd just kind of like, because let's be honest, it wasn't a reaction that the joke wasn't funny. It was a reaction that most of the crowd didn't know what he was talking about because most of the crowd didn't care enough about AEW to know the story.
Yeah, I agree there too. I remember that. And he didn't get the pop that I think he wanted to saying that about Kevin Owens. I got it personally. I think people in the stands got it, but I think probably that's because the WWE universe is so loyal that they didn't care. They just didn't care. I think the ultimate role in all this is Triple H has totally taken AEW down systematically with the signing of CM Punk. And now he's going to throw his WWE money, his WWE power, and really trying to annihilate Tony Khan and AEW, because now you have The Rock, who's obviously going to be coming back for WrestleMania, who's now rumored to be coming back possibly more than just a one-off at WrestleMania. Right. So people are going to be like, AEW who now? This is where I'm talking about with Tony Khan, and they need the right to ship and so forth. They haven't done it now. I don't know when they're going to do it. This fiasco tomorrow night. I've watched AEW now since it came out. I either the DVR or I watch it live. I will tell you, since the CM Punk debacle last year and all that, watching these shows is almost like watching paint dry, and I feel bad because I'm a wrestling fan. I want that alternative. I want the alternative audience. I want people to tune in because at one time AEW was must-see TV. Don't get me wrong, but the product has gone stale. And whether or not Tony Khan is using social media to reinvigorate the product, the way he's doing it's not helping. He's losing money. He's losing audience. The ratings are in the toilet. So I don't know what the matter is, but I think Triple H now sees blood in the water, and he's just going to just annihilate Tony Khan all the way up to WrestleMania with this.
Speaking of social media, or the reactions, I should say, you talked about boosting the company. One of the earlier moments we talked about was the Twitter war with Chris Jericho. One of the side effects of that was questions. Nick Hausman, House of Wrestling, asked him about what are the NDAs that you want? What about NDAs you made people sign? And then stories came out about Chris Jericho's involvement with Kylie Ray. At one point, Nick Hausman compared him to Harvey Weinstein.
Oh.
And to the point where, if you remember that at the big event, the pay-per-view they had, the crowd pretty much hijacked the match and were booing. I mean, even Sting couldn't get a pop. They were cheering heels when they were beating up Jericho. They were chanting NDA and Kylie Ray and now, I mean, his social media activity has killed any chance he has as a character right now. The crowd does not. They don't see Chris Jericho the wrestler. They see Chris Jericho the unhinged social media nut who may or may not be touching people inappropriately. And again, this is all alleged. Nothing's come out yet. But what are your thoughts on that?
When that came out that day, he had that match that night. There was like no. I watched that and I was like, he came in, did his thing, and left, and that was it. He wrestled and all that stuff. But then the following week on Dynamite, he had a run-in, and I think he did it last week too. He had another run-in. No one's singing Fozzie's music anymore. Well, I think they're doing it on purpose because they don't know what to expect from a live crowd.
Not even just no one's singing. I don't know if you noticed, and Benny, I don't know if you watched or not, but the Fozzy entrance was like deafeningly loud. I mean, they were going to blow the speakers up in the arena. I think the first week they did it, they were in Daly's place. Where that's old school WCW ECW trick where if we play the music really loud, the viewers can't tell how loud the crowd is booing.
Yeah.
And like you said, nobody sang it, and it was so loud they were clearly trying to drown something out. And then
I think they picked the wrong venue for that. I mean, any other arena that would have worked, but Daly's place is open air kind of too as well. So they picked the wrong time. I know it was the coming home episode and all that stuff. I watched that episode and in the Sting move at the end, going off the table, the 60-something-year-old guy going through a table is like, it's a tough product to watch right now. I understand. And then you get Sting's last match is now going to be a tag team match, and it's going to be with the Young Bucks, and it's like this makes zero sense storyline wise, but whatever.
Speaking of social media, we saw the reaction on social media. Even diehard AEW faithful are predominantly going, what? Like, I mean, you got that roster and Sting's history. You telling me you couldn't throw a couple $1 million at Ricky Steamboat or somebody to hell, I'm pretty sure at this point fans would rather see Ric Flair, except maybe Benny, would rather see Ric Flair come back. But
just to go back to the pay-per-view a couple weeks ago from AEW, even the botched flaming table move with Adam Copeland and Nick Wayne.
Yeah.
It's horrendous. Like, what is going on with this company? Like, they can't even, the production value is even off as well. Right. I don't mean to switch gears, but
no, you're fine.
You know, the hard cam takes and all that stuff that you're supposed to see, the moves and all that stuff. They're out of order. Like, something's wrong with AEW right now, and they need to steer that ship right. I don't know what's going to happen, but social media is not their friend right now. That's for sure.
Well, Benny, I said this was going to be a shorter episode, so we've got about 10 minutes left. I want your thoughts, hypothetical, fantasy booking, whatever you want to call it. Benny Scala, you've just been hired by Tony Khan. You are now guru, VP, whatever you want to call it. You control AEW's social media presence. What are you doing?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I'd probably just cash my first check and leave.
You big dummy! Look who's behind you.
Right. What I was thinking, actually, Joe, when did you first go to the Boston Garden?
1981, July of 1981. Right. George the Animal.
So you were how old then? You were 12?
I was 12 years old. Yep.
Okay.
Turning 12. I should say 11. I was almost 12.
I think, social media coupled with the abolition of kayfabe, we're not wrestling fans anymore. We're wrestling analysts. We feel like we have a right to interject ourselves, cheering for the heels and things like that. When Joe went to the Boston Garden at 12 years old, now you did like the heels though, right? Or did you like Morocco?
Let's say that again. I liked who?
You liked Morocco, didn't you? Like Don Morocco?
Morocco was my favorite wrestler, even though he was booed. I just loved the reaction that he got from the crowd. Yeah.
Right. Yep. But for the most part, there weren't that many cheers for Morocco, correct?
No, they were booed.
We're now like the lines are so blurred, and it to me it's unwatchable. So I'd sign the contract, I'd cash a couple of checks, and then
But you own the company.
No, I'm the
That's
booker.
hypothetical, right,
Yeah.
Dan? He owns the company. You just
Yeah.
gotta go. That's it.
Well, now that we know Joe, now that we know Benny would just take the money and run. What about you? Same question to you. What are you doing if you're on the disciplinary committee or whatever you want to call it, and you get to control social media?
First of all, I would confiscate everybody's phones and say there's no social media allowed in AEW. If you want to wrestle and get paid, that's it. That's one thing I would do. I'm sure that wouldn't actually happen, but I would definitely, put it in there that that AEW would assume all rights to your Twitter handle, X handle, Facebook account, and all that stuff. If you want to do stuff on your personal account and all that stuff, fine. But if AEW is attached to your name at all whatsoever, just like I know things have changed over the past now. A lot of WWE people used to have WWE in their handles and all that stuff, and they've slowly gotten rid of that because they know that they are hired talent. They're they're W-9 performers and so forth. They're so they're not going to be able to use that handle afterwards. So they need to make a name for themselves. I would definitely, if I were to social media wise, definitely anything that's AEW related is property of AEW. And if you're going to put a tweet out there or whatever, a post, if it has anything to do with AEW programming, contracts, NDAs, backstage altercations, you name it, it needs to go through corporate first. Like any company. If I work for a company, a bank company, and I said, oh, I know a stock that's going to be going good soon, all that stuff's regulated now. Same thing should happen, I think, with social media in the wrestling industry now. At some point, it's going to have to be regulated. But hypothetically, if I did own that, there would definitely be some severe consequences or rules in place to nullify any type of social media involvement, whether it's a negative and a positive too. If you want to put that positive thing out, it still has to go through corporate. Anything that's AEW related would have to go through corporate. So that's kind of how I would curb it. Whether or not that works or not, I don't know. I think it's a generational thing too now. Like I said, I remember when there was no social media. I remember when there was no internet. Wrestling magazines were my internet, and that was a month old or 2 months old. So I would definitely put those measures in place to stop instances just like this. And by the way, the Jack Perry thing over the weekend, you're ripping up his AEW contract. Does he not know that Tony Khan owns New Japan? I mean, did we all lose sight in that somewhere? Like, you just ripped up your own contract, but you're still working for the company. They knew it was a work. Security was filled in at the last second to let him over the railing and unmask himself and all that stuff.
Oh, so. Is that who that was ripping up the paper? I thought the homeless peanut vendor from outside had gotten into the arena.
Same
it's rather apparent now he didn't shave or get a haircut since that time. So yeah, Jack Perry's Luke's boy is growing up.
CM Punk knocked him out. He actually just woke up on the floor of Wembley a couple of days ago. But
I meant to ask, who got the monitor thrown off? Was it CM Punk throwing the monitor or Jack Perry throw the monitor at the backstage altercation?
I don't know, but I heard the
I heard a monitor was involved.
What's his name? Woo Kid, the rapper that was performing at Wembley.
Oh, yeah.
He went on he posted a bunch of stuff about how there was blood everywhere and Tony Khan
but not
was yelling
one video,
and
right?
Screaming.
Not one video.
There's a guy named the Woo Kid.
I want to say that's
Ric
it.
Flair, like,
I wanted to. I could be wrong. There's few things in life I care less about than rappers hired to perform at a wrestling show. But he told you. I guess he said there was a lot of blood, and that's probably from the spot Jack Perry did before the fight.
But not one video. This day and age, people record car accidents,
especially because the way Wembley's. People have pointed out the way Wembley's built, where the gorilla position has like 3 security cameras. Like, there is definitely footage of what happened. It's just no one's going to say anything.
But if Tony Khan got knifed in the back, there'd be videos everywhere about it. So yeah.
The bottom line though is AEW needs to morph from a frat house into a well-run company, and I don't think that's ever going to happen with Tony Khan at the helm.
No. I don't know if you guys saw too what he's obviously has his crush on Tony Storm, and it's rather apparent now that it's and he's on social media. I love Tony Storm. I love her. I'm like, dude, you got to take a step back. You got to stop. I think social media right now is not helping AEW. That is for sure.
No, absolutely not.
Well, Joe, this has been fun conversation. Like I said, we kind of did a mini episode tonight. We'll definitely bring you back on, talk some more. But before we before we log off tonight, you got a lot of stuff to plug. Tell everybody where they can find you.
Well, What a Day in Centerville is a Facebook and online show based out of Centerville, Iowa here. I'm a Bostonian that is transplanted to a small town, so I do a live show on Wednesday nights there. We have obviously Monty and the Pharaoh. We have the 30 coming up on Thursday night. I think there's going to be a time difference on that, but we'll find out more about that. Wrestling Remembered. We got tapes on Fridays as well. Line Drive Baseball podcast, which is a little bit on hiatus right now, but will be returning soon. So there's a lot coming down the pike. So stay tuned to Monty and the Pharaoh. And of course, Dan and Benny, thank you guys very much for having me on the show tonight. I greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely. And we can't let you go without you got to tell our fans the story. Where did the nickname Whattaday come from?
What a day. Okay, so I was a little kid. As you like all little kids, when you got nervous, some people would hide in a corner, some people would do whatever. I had a nervous tick and I'd say, what a day. And what usually happened is when I say that, somebody would either belt out something about sports, the news, the weather, whether it's good news or bad news. And over the years, it just became a thing. What a day. What a day. You hear it all the time. What a day, right? Mm-hmm. So I kind of, about 2016, 2017, I kind of took it to the next level and brought it over to the social media side and wrestling and all that. But that's how it actually started out. It was a nervous tick. I used to say, what a day.
Thing. Wow.
Nice. Well, talk about turning a weakness into a strength, if you
exactly.
or however that old cliche goes.
Yep.
Turn out lemonade or lemons into lemonade.
Yeah, exactly. Or turn cinnamon into fireball like Benny does when he's having bad days.
Poop into chicken soup, right?
That's Friday night, right?
Well, Joe, thank you so much for obviously Dan and Benny. Like he pitched a show. We can be found anywhere podcasts are listened to. And of course, to our friends Monty and the Pharaoh on YouTube. So for Whattaday Joe Lowry, for the playa himself, Benny Scala, I'm Dan Sebastian. Have a good night, everyone, and we will see you next time we're in the ring.
What a day.